Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome once again to our Bible as History series. We do hope and pray that episode 1 and 2 were very helpful to you. Um, just to remind you, we always feel it's important to say this. You may be a person of faith watching these videos, and we hope that you can use these as a resource, that this will help you grow in your faith. And if confliction comes, you won't feel sort of that you don't have any answers. On the other hand, if you're watching this and you're a person who has no faith, perhaps you're maybe quite skeptical of the Bible, we hope also that this will challenge you to dig deeper into this. As Christians, we believe that it is very important to defend the Bible when it makes historical claims to certain events and people. So we hope this is helpful to you, and welcome today to episode 3 of our series. And today we're looking at Pontius Pilate. Was he really a historical character? And what can we learn from him? Or what can we learn from the Bible about him, rather? The reason we're looking at Pontius Pilate today is that it does seem a bit like the other subjects that we've looked at, that this area has come under attack, and that some people have even doubted his existence. And so if the Bible mentions it, then it's making an historical claim. So we believe in defending that claim, which is why we feel it's really important to look at this topic today. I'm joined today by Pastor Richard Miles of Upper Trosnant Baptist Church. We welcome you today, Richard. How are you?
Yep. I'm okay, thanks. Good. Excellent, yes.
Good. We thank you so much for preparing some answers for us. We know you've done a lot of research. And so we'd like to go straight in, if that's okay. And can I ask you for our first question, who was Pontius Pilate?
Well, the first thing to say is that he was a real person, not fictitious. Now, we read about him in the New Testament gospel accounts, and it's important to note that he appears in all 4 of the gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all speak about Pilate. So this shows that he was a significant figure, in particular in the role of putting, but more about that later. But there was also much more written about Pilate by other writers, in particular the 2 writers, Josephus and Philo. And in fact, they give much more detail about him than we read in the gospel accounts. Now, what's important is that we're aware that this was the time of the Roman Empire, and the Romans sent the governors to different places in their empires to keep an eye on things and to make sure that there was nothing done to go against the Roman authority. And these governors were also known as prefects. Now, that word prefect may remind you of school, when some of the older pupils would be appointed by the head and the staff to keep an eye on the other pupils to make sure they behaved. Well, Pilate was appointed as a prefect. He was the prefect or Roman governor of Judea from AD 26 to 37. And in fact, in 1961, archaeologists discovered inscription even at Caesarea Maritima. It was actually a block of limestone, and that refers to him as prefect. And this gives us historical evidence that Pilate was a real person. And he was there under the authority of the Romans as prefect to keep an eye on those living in Judea. So that's who Pilate was.
That's very encouraging, Richard, that we have at least 3 different sources then outside the Bible that confirm that he was a real person in that area at that time. And so as we read the gospel accounts and maybe a bit of information from history, do we know what sort of person he was?
Well, Josephus and Philo, the extra biblical writers, they portray Pilate as being very cruel. He didn't have much time for Jewish customs and beliefs, and he was certainly very much in agreement with Roman authorities. I mean, just to give one example from the writing of Josephus, Pilate insisted on bringing images of Caesar into Jerusalem. And he knew exactly what he was doing there. He knew that it was going to annoy and upset the Jews to do that. And so the Jews sent a delegation to Pilate to get him to remove the images. And they pleaded with him for 5 days to do that. And by the 6th day, Pilate sent soldiers into the crowd with the intention to put to death any Jews who didn't agree to having these images. And the Jews were prepared to go to their death rather than allow these images. But in the end, Pilate relented because he was afraid that this might all provoke a riot. And he didn't want that, because if there was a riot, it didn't look good for the governors or prefects. If they were to allow riots and unrest in their countries, it would make them look really bad. And so in the end, he decided to remove the images from Jerusalem. Not because he wanted to please the Jews, but as it were to save his own skin and stop him being in trouble with Rome for allowing unrest. Now, that account is not in the Bible. As I say, it was Josephus who records it. But I'm only sharing it with you to show what Pilate was like. Very much, on the one hand, wanting to suck up to the Roman authorities, but on the other hand, not wanting a disturbance among the people. And as we'll see, that was exactly the way he was when he came to deal with Jesus. There's one other incident that I do want to mention, which we do read in the Bible. In fact, we read it in Luke's Gospel, Luke chapter 13, verses 1 to 3. Now there were some present at that time who told Jesus about the Galileans, whose blood Pilate had mixed with their sacrifices. Jesus answered, "Do you think these Galileans are worse sinners than all the other Galileans because they suffered in this way? I tell you, no. But unless you repent, you too will perish." So it was seen that Pilate was quite prepared to kill. These Galileans were in the temple offering sacrifices, and Pilate arranged for them to be killed. And as they died, their own blood was mixed with the blood of the sacrifices they were offering. And so Pilate, yes, was prepared to kill if he thought it was necessary. But overall, as we've already seen, what Pilate wanted more than anything else was a quiet life. And so his character was, on the one hand, he wanted to do what the Romans wanted, but on the other hand, he would appease the Jews if it suited him.
Yes, thank you, Richard. And that is sounding very familiar to what we know in the Gospels. So can I ask you the last question? What was his involvement with Jesus Christ himself?
Well, as I said earlier, we have accounts in each of the 4 Gospels of Pilate's dealings with Jesus. And so just to summarize what they say, first of all, we need to realize that the religious leaders were the ones who put Jesus under arrest because they didn't like the fact that he was claiming to be divine and being a king. Now, Jesus had already stood trial before the religious court, but they didn't have any authority to do anything to Jesus. They couldn't sentence him to any sort of punishment. And so they had to go to a higher authority. And so here's the thing to bear in mind. These religious leaders were prepared to go to someone who was part of the Roman authority. Yes, this Roman authority who had no time for Jews and their religion. They were prepared to go to them to deal with Jesus. That was how strongly they felt. And so, because Pilate was the one who was the Roman governor in Judea, it was to him that they went. Now, bear in mind the sort of person that Pilate was. Yes, he was ruthless when he thought it was necessary. but he didn't want to have to deal with a dispute between these religious leaders and the man Jesus. And so at first, Pilate said to the religious leaders, well, you deal with it yourselves. This has nothing to do with me. You see, he was afraid these religious leaders would cause unrest by involving him. But the religious leaders were insistent. As far as they were concerned, Jesus was a criminal and deserved punishment. So in the end, Jesus was brought to Pilate. And you get the impression as he was asking Jesus these questions, he didn't really want to get involved. I mean, he was asking him if he was the king of the Jews. But Pilate wasn't really interested in whether that was true or not. In fact, he came out with the famous line, what is truth? As Jesus told Pilate that he was the truth. And Pilate, no doubt, was thinking, oh, this is great for a philosophical discussion. But in the end, there was nothing that Jesus said that made Pilate think that he was guilty of a crime. And so Pilate simply wanted to let Jesus go. But the religious leaders were not happy with that. They wanted him put to death. And then something happened. Pilate realized that at that time of the year, it was customary for a prisoner held on charge to be released. And so Pilate thought that he could say to the religious leaders, well, here's this man Jesus on a charge. I can release him. I haven't acquitted him, but I've simply released him because of this custom. But no, the religious leaders didn't want that. They were determined that Jesus be put to death. And so Pilate had to release someone else. And the only other person in custody at that time was a man called Barabbas, who had taken part in an uprising. And there's no way Pilate really wanted him released, because, as we said before, an uprising was bad for him. But obviously Pilate thought, well, if I release Jesus, there'll be an even bigger uprising. And so once again, we get a glimpse of the sort of man that Pilate was as he dealt with Jesus. If Pilate really had the courage of his convictions, he would have said, this man is innocent, and whatever you say, I'm not going to sentence him to death. But Pilate was too afraid of the crowds, and he's afraid of what would happen. The people would be too upset. In fact, we read those crowds were shouting, crucify him, at Jesus. And so Pilate gave in to them and sentenced Jesus to death on a cross. And so Pilate, therefore, was very instrumental in the death of Jesus, which we're particularly remembering during this coming week as we come up to Good Friday. And as we think of the sacrifice that Jesus made, as he took upon himself the sin of the world, so that people like us can be brought into a relationship with God.
Yes, thank you so much, Richard. I never made that connection of that he probably really did not want to release Barabbas because he was a bit of a troublemaker in all these riots and stirring things up. So that's a helpful connection as well. Well, we'd like to thank you so much, Richard, for bringing us all that information. And I'm just really struck how that example you shared from history matches exactly what kind of character Pilate is portrayed as being in the Gospels. And so we really see once again that history and the Bible meet together very nicely and perfectly in that regard. We also just like to remind everyone the importance of this event and this story, that these were the sequence of events leading up to the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And as Christians, we truly believe that this is the foundation of our faith. And just to give you a little bit of a teaser, the topic of the resurrection is what we're going to be looking at next in our Bible history series. So please stay tuned for that. But the importance of Jesus's death on the cross at this Easter time, we hope and pray this is something that you will think seriously about, and how it is so beneficial for our lives, and how important it is to accept Christ as Savior. So that's all from us. We'd like to thank you once again, Richard, and I hope this has helped everyone. You've enjoyed it, and have a great day. Thank you.